The bridge of the Steadfast was quiet. Captain stood near the main viewing screen, his hands behind his back, watching the stars pass by. The ship moved through space like a small fish in a very large ocean. Humans had been traveling among the stars for almost 200 years now, but still felt small when he looked out at the endless darkness. "Captain," said Park from her navigation station. Her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it. "Worry, maybe. We are receiving a signal." Turned to look at her. Was young, only 28 years old, but she was the best navigator he had ever worked with. She could read star maps like other people read books. Right now, her face was pale. "What kind of signal?" he asked. "Emergency beacon, human origin." She paused and looked at her screen again, as if hoping the information would change. "It is coming from Sector 7 Omega." The bridge went completely silent. The chief engineer stopped typing. Shin, the medical officer, looked up from her tablet. Even the quiet hum of the ship system seemed to grow quieter. Sector 7 Omega. Everyone knew that name. Every species in the galaxy knew it. The Galactic Assembly had given it another name, an official name that appeared on every star chart in every language, the Silent Expanse. Below that name on every map were the same words: entry forbidden by unanimous decree. No one went there. No one had gone there for 400,000 years. The oldest species in the galaxy, beings who had been traveling through space when humans were still living in caves, refused to even talk about it. When young species asked why, the elders would only say that something lived there. Something old. Something hungry. Something that had ended civilizations before. "Are you certain the signal is human?" asked. His voice was steady, but his heart was beating fast. Nodded. "Yes, Captain. The signal code matches a ship that was lost 30 years ago, the colony vessel New Dawn." Felt like someone had punched him in the chest. The New Dawn, he knew that ship. Everyone in his family knew that ship. His grandmother had been on board when it disappeared. She had been the ship's doctor, had been only 5 years old when she left, but he still remembered her face, her warm smile, the way she would tell him stories about the stars. The assembly had declared all 12,000 passengers dead after 6 months of searching. There was a memorial on Earth with their names carved in stone. Visited it every year on the anniversary. But now there was a signal, a human signal, coming from a place where nothing should be alive. "How old is this beacon?" he asked. Checked her instruments. "It is active, Captain. It was turned on recently, within the last 48 hours. "Impossible," said. The engineer was a big man with rough hands and a practical mind. He did not believe in mysteries. "Nothing survives in the silent expanse. The assembly says." "I know what the assembly says," interrupted. He walked to the communication station and pressed a button. "Open a channel to Assembly Station 12, Priority Alpha." A few minutes later, a face appeared on the main screen. It was not a human face. Ambassador Telos of the Collective had 17 eyes arranged in a circle around a mouth that looked like a flower made of teeth. His species was one of the oldest in the galaxy. They had been part of the assembly for 3 million years. "Captain," Telos said. His voice was like wind blowing through dry leaves. "This is unexpected. How may I assist you?" "Ambassador, we have detected a human emergency signal from Sector 7 Omega. I am requesting permission to investigate." Telos's 17 eyes all blinked at different times. It was strange to watch. "You are requesting permission to enter the silent expanse?" "Yes." "Permission." Had expected this answer. "Ambassador, with respect, there may be human survivors in there. The signal is from a ship that was lost 30 years ago. 12,000 people were on board." "They are dead," Telos said. His voice held no emotion. "Everything that enters the expanse dies. This has been true since before my species learned to speak. Whatever is creating that signal, it is not your people. It is a trap, a lure. The thing that lives there is patient. It waits for curious beings to come looking. What if you are wrong? Tell Us made a sound that might have been a laugh. Captain, I am 847 years old. I have seen 12 species join the assembly, and I have watched 4 species die. Each of those 4 species died because they thought they were special. They thought the old warnings did not apply to them. They went into the dark places and they did not come back. Thought about his grandmother. He thought about her warm hands and her kind eyes. He thought about standing at her memorial every year, looking at her name carved in cold stone. What is in there? He asked. What is in the silent expanse? Tell Us was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost sad. We call it the hollow. It is not alive the way you or I are alive. It is something else. Something that existed before the first stars were born. It feeds on minds, on thoughts, on hope. It reaches into your head and it takes everything that makes you want to live. And then when you are empty, it keeps you alive anyway, because your suffering feeds it too. How do you know this? Asked, if no one comes back. Because sometimes we find the ships, Tell Us said. Drifting near the border, everyone on board is still alive. Their hearts beat, their lungs breathe, but their minds are gone. They are empty. They do not eat. They do not sleep. They just stare at nothing until their bodies finally fail. The ambassador leaned closer to the screen. Do not go there, Captain. Whatever you lost, it is already gone, except this. Mourn, move forward. The transmission ended. The screen went dark. Stood alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew waited. They did not speak. They did not move. They knew what he was thinking. They knew what he was going to do. Captain, Shin said gently. She was the oldest member of the crew, almost 60 years old, with gray hair and wise eyes. The ambassador is probably right, after 30 years. I know, said. I know the chances are almost zero. I know this is probably a trap. I know I am being foolish. He turned to face his crew. These people had served with him for 5 years. They trusted him. They followed him. But there is a signal, a human signal, and as long as there is any chance, no matter how small, that someone is alive in there and waiting for help, I cannot ignore it. He looked at each of them in turn. I will not order anyone to come with me. This is my choice. If you want to leave the ship at the next station, I will understand. No one moved. No one spoke. Finally laughed. It was a rough sound like rocks grinding together. Captain, I have been fixing this ship for 5 years. If you think I am going to let you fly it into some forbidden death zone without me, you are crazy. Who else is going to keep the engines running? Park smiled. Someone needs to navigate. You would fly into a sun without me. Shin sighed and shook her head. I suppose someone needs to keep you all alive, or at least try. Felt something warm in his chest. Pride, maybe, or gratitude, or both. Set a course for Sector 7 Omega, he said. Maximum speed. The Steadfast turned and flew toward the darkness. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations watched their sensors. They saw the small human ship cross the boundary into forbidden space. They saw it disappear from all tracking systems, swallowed by the darkness like a stone sinking into deep water. Ambassador Tell Us stood in his office and closed all 17 of his eyes. Another species learns why we do not go there, he said to no one. But deep in his ancient heart, he hoped he was wrong. The first thing they noticed was the silence, not the normal silence of space, which was empty and clean. This was different. This silence had weight. It pressed against the ship like deep water pressing against a submarine. It made their ears hurt and their teeth ache. The second thing they noticed was the darkness. There were no stars here, not a single point of light in any direction. The viewing screens showed nothing but black, pure, absolute black. It was like being blind. It was like being buried alive. This is wrong, Park whispered. Her hands were shaking as she tried to read her instruments. Stars do not just disappear. This is not possible. The stars did not disappear, said. His voice was quiet. They were removed. Something took them. No one asked what could remove stars. No one wanted to know. Captain stood at the center of the bridge, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the empty screen. "Can you still track the beacon signal?" he asked. Nodded. "Yes, it is the only thing I can track. Everything else is gone. No landmarks, no reference points, just the beacon pulling us forward." "Then we follow it." The Steadfast moved deeper into the darkness. Hours passed, or maybe days. Time felt strange here, like it was bending and stretching. The crew took turns sleeping, but their sleep was filled with bad dreams. Dreams of drowning, dreams of falling, dreams of being watched by something with no eyes. It started with... She was sitting at her station when she suddenly stood up. Her face was blank. Her eyes were open, but they were not seeing anything in the room. She opened her mouth and began to speak in a language no one had ever heard before. The words were sharp and cold like broken glass. They hurt to listen to. Shin rushed to her side and grabbed her shoulders. "Can you hear me?" Kept speaking. The strange words poured out of her mouth like water from a broken pipe. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. She blinked. She looked around the bridge, confused. "What happened?" she asked. Her voice was her own again. "Why are you all looking at me?" "You were speaking," said carefully, "but not in any language we know." Shook her head. "I do not remember. I was looking at my instruments and then..." She touched her face. Her cheeks were wet with tears she did not remember crying. "I felt something. Something was looking at me, looking inside me." Shin ran medical scans, but they showed nothing wrong. His body was healthy. Her brain was functioning normally. But they all knew something had happened. Something had touched her mind. Was next. They found him in the engine room 3 hours later, drawing on the walls. He had used a piece of metal to scratch symbols into the ship's hull. The symbols were strange and twisted. Looking at them made everyone feel sick. Some of the crew said the symbols seemed to move when they looked away. Said gently, "What are you doing?" The engineer did not answer. He kept scratching at the wall, adding more symbols, making the pattern larger and more complex. His fingers were bleeding from the work, but he did not seem to notice. Grabbed his arm and pulled him away from the wall, blinked and looked at his captain. For a moment his eyes were empty. Then, slowly, life came back to them. Captain looked at his bleeding hands. He looked at the symbols on the wall. His face went pale. "I do not remember doing this. I was checking the engines and then there was a voice. Not a voice exactly, more like a feeling. It was so sad, Captain, so incredibly sad, like all the loneliness in the universe pressed into one moment. And it wanted me to understand. It wanted me to write down what it was feeling." Shin bandaged his hands while the others covered the symbols with sheets. No one wanted to look at them. That night could not sleep. He lay in his small cabin, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Ambassador Telos's warning. The hollow, something that fed on minds, something that reached inside you and took everything that made you want to live. He understood now. The hollow was not attacking them with weapons or claws. It was attacking them with despair, with hopelessness. It was finding the dark places in their minds and making them bigger, making them impossible to ignore. He wondered how long they could last before it broke them completely. Felt it touch his mind around midnight. It came like a wave of cold water washing over his thoughts, searching for cracks in his heart. It found them easily. The grief for his grandmother, the guilt of not being able to save her, the fear that he had led his crew into death. The hollow took these feelings and made them louder, made them unbearable, felt tears running down his face. He felt himself sinking into darkness, wanting to give up, wanting to stop fighting. But then something strange happened. He got angry. Not at the hollow, at himself, at the idea of giving up. His grandmother had raised him to be stronger than this. She had told him when he was a small boy that life would try to break him, that sadness would try to drown him, and she had taught him what to do when that happened. You keep going anyway. Not because the sadness goes away, not because things get easier. You keep going because giving up is not who you are. You keep going out of pure stubbornness." The hollow pushed harder. It showed him visions of his crew dying. It whispered that his mission was pointless. It told him that hope was a lie and resistance was foolish. Laughed, it was not a happy laugh. It was tired and rough and a little bit crazy, but it was real. "I have been sad before," he said out loud to the darkness, to whatever was listening. "I have been hopeless before, and I am still here. You are going to have to try harder than that." The pressure on his mind eased, not because the hollow gave up, but because it was confused. It had been feeding on minds for millions of years. Every species it had touched eventually broke. They surrendered. They stopped fighting. This human was terrified. The hollow could taste his fear like sweet wine, but he was still functioning, still thinking, still planning. His fear existed alongside his determination, and somehow that made him stronger, not weaker. The hollow did not understand. It had never encountered anything like this before. Morning came, or what passed for morning on a ship with no sun to mark the time, gathered his crew on the bridge. They all looked tired. They all looked scared, but they were all still standing. "I felt it," Shin said. "Last night it tried to make me feel worthless, useless, like my life meant nothing." "Me too," said. "It showed me everyone I have ever disappointed, every mistake I have ever made." Nodded. It wanted me to believe that we were already dead, that fighting was pointless. Looked at each of them, and yet here you are, all of you still here, still fighting. "It is not easy," admitted. "The feelings do not go away, the sadness is still there." "I know," said, "but we keep going anyway. That is what humans do. We feel the fear and we keep walking forward." The ship's sensors suddenly beeped, ran to her station and checked the readings. Her face changed from exhaustion to excitement. "Captain, I am detecting a planet, a solid surface, and—" She checked again to make sure she was reading it correctly. "Life signs, human life signs, thousands of them." Felt his heart skip. The new dawn survivors. "It has to be. There is nothing else out here." The Steadfast adjusted course toward the planet. Behind them, in the endless darkness, the hollow watched and waited. It had been patient for 400,000 years. It could be patient a little longer. But for the first time in all those years, it felt something new, something it did not recognize. Uncertainty. The planet was gray and dead. No plants, no water, no color at all. Just endless fields of ash-colored rock under a sky that held no stars. It was the most depressing place had ever seen. The perfect home for something that fed on despair. But there, in the center of a wide valley, was the crashed colony ship New Dawn. It lay on its side like a wounded animal, its hull torn and broken. Around it, spreading out in every direction, was a settlement. Small buildings made from ship parts, roads made from flattened metal, gardens growing under artificial lights. And people, hundreds of people, walking between the buildings, working in the gardens, living their lives in this impossible place. "They are alive," whispered. She was crying, but she was also smiling. "They are really alive." The Steadfast landed at the edge of the settlement. A crowd had already gathered to watch them arrive. They were thin and pale, these survivors, wearing clothes that had been repaired many times, but their eyes were bright, alert, curious. Walked down the ship's ramp with his crew behind him. The crowd parted and an old woman stepped forward. She was small and bent with age, her white hair pulled back in a simple bun. She must have been almost 90 years old, but would have recognized her anywhere, even after 30 years, even after thinking she was dead. "Grandmother," he said. His voice broke on the word. Looked at him with eyes that were still sharp despite her years. She studied his face, matching it to the memory of a 5-year-old boy she had left behind so long ago. She said, "You got tall." He laughed. The sound surprised him. Then he was hugging her, this tiny old woman who had survived the impossible, and she was hugging him back, and both of them were crying. "I knew someone would come," she said into his shoulder. I told them that humans do not give up on each other. The survivors welcomed the steadfast crew into their settlement. They called it Daybreak, a name full of hope in a place that had no dawn. Over the next few hours explained everything. When the new dawn crashed 30 years ago, nearly 10,000 people had died. The survivors, about 4,000, had expected to die as well. They could feel the hollow pressing against their minds. They watched some of their friends give up, stop eating, stop moving, just fade away into nothing. But others refused. They built shelters. They found ways to grow food using the ship's hydroponics systems. They organized. They created rules and schedules and work assignments. And most importantly, they created community. The hollow attacks minds, explained. She sat within her small home, a cup of tea warming her old hands. It feeds on hopelessness, so we made hope our weapon. She told him about the music hall they had built in the first year. Every evening, people gathered to sing songs, old songs from Earth, songs about love and loss and keeping on despite everything. The hollow hated those songs. It could not understand why beings in so much pain would choose to make music. She told him about the theater where survivors performed plays, comedies mostly, bad jokes and silly stories that made people laugh. Laughter confused the hollow even more than singing. Why would creatures facing eternal darkness choose to be happy? She told him about the community kitchens where people shared meals together, about the schools where children learned history and science and art, about the counselors who helped people talk through their darkest thoughts instead of drowning in them. We lost people, admitted. Her voice was sad but not defeated, especially in the early years. The hollow found ways through our defenses. Some people could not hold on, she paused. But most of us survived because we had each other, because we refused to let the darkness win. Thought about the night before, about how the hollow had tried to break him, about how he had fought back with nothing but stubbornness and anger. Why does this work? He asked. Other species have tried to resist. None of them survived. Smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was real warmth in it. I have thought about this for 30 years. I think it is because of how human minds work. When the hollow attacks, it creates feelings of despair and hopelessness. In most species, these feelings overwhelm everything else. Their minds cannot function under that much pressure. She set down her teacup. But humans are different. We have evolved to carry heavy emotional weight. Our ancestors survived ice ages and famines and wars. They felt despair, but they kept moving. They passed that ability to us. We can feel utterly hopeless and still get out of bed in the morning. We can believe that everything is meaningless and still choose to love each other. The hollow does not know what to do with that. A young man appeared in the doorway. He was tall and strong, with a serious face and careful eyes. Elder, he said, the sensors are showing increased activity in the outer zone. It is getting stronger. Nodded. Thank you. Tell everyone to prepare for evening gathering. We will need extra songs tonight. Oh, the settlement security chief bowed slightly and left. Turned back to her grandson. The hollow is not happy that you are here. It is going to try harder now. It has been studying us for 30 years, learning our weaknesses. The attacks have been getting more sophisticated, more personal. What do you mean? In the beginning, it just sent waves of sadness, easy to resist if you were prepared. Now it finds specific memories, specific fears. It knows exactly which buttons to push for each person. She looked out her small window at the gray sky. We cannot hold forever. Our population has shrunk to 2,000, partly from natural deaths, but partly from the hollow getting smarter. If we stay here another 30 years, there will be no one left. Took her hand. It was small and fragile, but the grip was strong. Then we do not stay. We get everyone out, back to real space, back to safety. Shook her head. The hollow will not let us leave. Every ship we have tried to launch has been destroyed. It watches the sky. It waits for us to try. My ship is faster than anything you had, better shielded. We might be able to. Your ship cannot carry 2,000 people. Was quiet. She was right. The Steadfast was an exploration vessel, not a transport. Even if they packed people into every corner, they could only save maybe 50. Then we send a message, he said. We tell the galaxy what you have learned, how to resist the hollow. We bring back a fleet big enough to evacuate everyone. And who will carry this message? Asked. Who will fly through the hollow's territory, with it fighting them every step of the way, trying to crush their mind before they reach safety? Met her eyes. We will. My crew and I, we came here knowing we might not leave. We can try. Was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled again, and this time there were tears in her eyes. You really did grow up well, my grandson. Your mother would be proud. She stood and walked to a small cabinet. From inside, she took a data drive. Everything we have learned in 30 years is on this drive. The nature of the hollow, its patterns, its weaknesses, instructions for building mental defenses. If this information reaches the assembly, they might actually be able to help us. For the first time in galactic history, someone might be able to fight back against the darkness. Took the drive. It was small and light, but it felt heavier than anything he had ever held. We will get this out, he said. I promise. That night the whole settlement gathered in the music hall. 2,000 people, singing together, their voices rising up into the starless sky. They sang old songs and new ones. They sang in perfect harmony and in terrible off-key chaos. They sang because singing was how they fought. The hollow pressed against them, trying to silence the music, trying to drown hope in despair. But the voices kept going. Stubborn, defiant, human. Stood with his grandmother and listened. Tomorrow, he would try to escape. Tomorrow, he would fly into the darkness with nothing but a data drive and the hope that it would matter. But tonight he just sang. Badly, loudly, with tears running down his face and a smile he could not explain. Sometimes that was enough. The plan was simple. The execution would be impossible. Stood in the Steadfast cargo bay with his crew, looking at the small shuttle that would carry their pilot to her death. Sat inside, running final checks on the systems. She was young, only 25, with short black hair and eyes that never seemed to stop moving. She was the best pilot had ever served with, and she had volunteered for a mission she would not survive. The decoy shuttle will fly in the opposite direction from the Steadfast, explained, pointing at a holographic map. I have modified its systems to broadcast human emotional signatures at maximum power. Hope, defiance, love, everything the hollow hates. It will be like a bright light in the darkness. The hollow will not be able to ignore it. And while it is distracted by me, said, the Steadfast escapes with the data. Shook his head. There has to be another way. I will not send you to die. Looked at him with steady eyes. Captain, I have done the math. The Steadfast cannot outrun the hollow, not while it is focused on us. Someone needs to draw its attention. Someone needs to be the sacrifice. Then let me do it. No, her voice was firm. You have to lead the ship. Park has to navigate, has to keep the engines running. Shin has to keep everyone alive. I am the only one who can be spared. She smiled, and it was a real smile, not a brave mask. Besides, I am the best pilot. If anyone can keep the hollow chasing them long enough for you to escape, it is me. Wanted to argue. He wanted to find another solution. But he looked at the data drive in his pocket, filled with 30 years of survival knowledge, and he knew she was right. 2,000 lives depended on getting this information out. The whole galaxy might depend on it. I am sorry, he said, it was not enough. Nothing would be enough. Shrugged, do not be sorry, just make it count. Get the message out, come back with a fleet, save those people. She stood and put a hand on his shoulder. And Captain, do not let the hollow tell you this was a waste. That is what it wants you to think. The truth is, some things are worth dying for. Shin hugged her, shook her hand, holding it too long, tried to speak but could not find words. They all knew they were saying goodbye. An hour later, the Steadfast and the decoy shuttle launched together. For a few minutes, they flew side by side, two tiny lights in the infinite darkness. Then the shuttle turned and accelerated in the opposite direction. The broadcast systems activated, flooding the void with human emotion. Hope, defiance, love, the willingness to sacrifice everything for people you would never meet. The Hollow responded immediately, felt the pressure on his mind suddenly decrease. The ancient being's attention had shifted, drawn toward this strange new signal that burned so brightly in its domain. "It is working," reported. Her voice was thick with tears she was trying to hide. "The Hollow is following her. We have a window." "Maximum speed," ordered. "Get us to the boundary." The Steadfast flew. The engines screamed at levels they were never designed to handle, stood at his station, coaxing every bit of power from the systems, keeping everything running through pure will and skill. But the Hollow was not stupid. It was ancient and patient, but it was also clever. It realized what was happening. The bright signal was a trick. The real target was getting away. The pressure returned, stronger than before, angrier. Visions flooded its mind. He saw himself failing. He saw the Steadfast crashing. He saw his grandmother dying alone in daybreak, abandoned, forgotten. He saw sacrifice meaning nothing. He saw the data drive floating in space, its message never delivered, its hope extinguished. "Captain," shouted. He could hear the strain in her voice. She was fighting her own visions. "It is hitting us hard." Screamed, she grabbed her head with both hands, her eyes squeezed shut. "I can hear it. It is inside me. It is showing me things." But something strange happened. The same connection that made vulnerable also gave her an ability no one expected. She could feel where the Hollow was focusing. She could sense its attention, like a blind person feeling heat from a fire. "Turn left," she shouted suddenly. "Now there is a gap." Did not question. He grabbed the controls and turned hard. The ship shuddered. "Now right quickly. It is shifting focus." Worked the engines, pushing them beyond their limits. Warnings flashed across every screen. The ship groaned like a living thing in pain. Guided them through the darkness, feeling the Hollow's attention, finding the gaps where its focus was weakest. She was using the enemy's own presence as a map. It was brilliant. It was terrible. Every moment of contact brought more visions, more despair, more weight on her mind. "How much longer?" asked. "I do not know," was crying freely now, tears streaming down her face. "The boundary should be close, but I cannot see it. I can only feel the monster." The Hollow pressed harder. It had given up on its decoy entirely. All its ancient attention was focused on this one ship, these few humans who dared to run from it. It whispered to them, not in words but in feelings. It told them that escape was impossible, that the boundary was a lie, that they would drift in darkness forever, slowly going mad, their minds breaking one piece at a time. Shin started humming. It was quiet at first, barely audible over the ship's alarms. An old song, a simple melody that mothers sang to children on Earth. Joined in. His voice was rough and tuneless, but he remembered the words. Then, between sobs, her voice cracking but still singing. The Hollow recoiled, not much but enough. The pressure eased slightly. The visions became less sharp. They sang louder, other songs now, anything they could remember, happy songs, sad songs, silly songs, it did not matter. The singing was the point, the choice to make music in the face of annihilation. "There," suddenly shouted. "I can feel it, the boundary straight ahead." Pushed the engines to full. The ship shook violently. Metal screamed. Something in the engine room exploded but was already there, rerouting power, keeping them moving. The Hollow threw everything at them. Every trick it had learned in 400,000 years. It found grief and twisted it into agony. It found secret fears and made them real. It found doubts and turned them into certainties. But they kept flying, they kept singing, they kept refusing to stop. The boundary appeared on their sensors, a line between darkness and stars, between death and life. The Steadfast crossed it. Light flooded the bridge. Stars, beautiful, ordinary stars. The pressure on their minds vanished instantly like a heavy blanket being pulled away. Collapsed at her station, unconscious but alive. Sat down hard on the floor, laughing and crying at the same time. Checked her medical scanner with shaking hands. Looked at the main screen. Stars, so many stars. He had never known how beautiful they were until he had lived without them. "We made it," he whispered. Then louder, "We made it." Behind them in the darkness they had escaped, the hollow raged. Its prey had escaped. For the first time in 400,000 years, something had gotten away. But there was still one light in its domain. One small shuttle, flying in the opposite direction, broadcasting hope into the void. Was still flying. The Steadfast's communication system crackled. It was weak, barely a whisper, but it was definitely her voice. "Captain, did you make it?" Grabbed the microphone. We made it, can you turn around, can you reach the boundary?" Static, a long pause, then her voice again, tired but calm. "Negative, Captain, I am too deep. The hollow has me surrounded, I am not getting out of this one." Closed his eyes. He had known this would happen. He had known from the moment she volunteered, but hearing it still hurt. "I am sorry," he said. "I am so sorry." "Don't be." He could hear her smile through the static. "I always wanted to do something that mattered, something bigger than myself. Now get that message out, Captain. Save those people. Make this worth it." "I will, I promise." "Good." Another pause. "Captain, the hollow keeps trying to make me feel despair, keeps showing me my death, keeps telling me I failed." She laughed softly. "You know what I keep telling it?" "What?" "I keep telling it jokes, really bad jokes. The kind my father used to tell. It hates them. It does not understand why I am laughing when I should be crying." Despite everything, smiled. "Keep laughing as long as you can." "Yes, Captain, out." The transmission ended. The Steadfast turned toward the nearest assembly station, carrying its precious cargo of hope. Behind them in the endless darkness kept flying, kept laughing, kept fighting. The hollow did not understand. It never would. 6 months had passed since the Steadfast escaped the silent expanse. 6 months since Captain had walked into the Galactic Assembly's Great Hall and played his grandmother's message for 4,000 species. The galaxy had changed. Stood on the bridge of the flagship Aurora, looking at a fleet larger than anything in recorded history. 10,000 ships from every corner of known space, warships and medical ships and transport vessels, each one painted with the same symbol, a small sun rising from darkness, the symbol of Operation Daybreak. Ambassador Telos stood beside him. The elder had not left side since the assembly voted to launch this mission. He had become an unexpected ally, using his ancient authority to convince skeptical species that this was possible. "I was wrong about your species," Telos said. His 17 eyes watched the fleet arrange itself into formation. "I thought you were children, fragile creatures who would break like all the others." "We break too," said. "We just keep going after we break." Telos made a sound that might have been agreement. "Your psychologists have been working with our scientists for months. The techniques they have developed are remarkable. Songs to sing when the despair becomes too heavy. Memories to hold onto when hope fades. The buddy system, you call it, making sure no one is ever alone." Nodded. Human counselors had been assigned to every ship in the fleet. They had spent months teaching other species how to resist the Hollow's attacks. The method seemed strange to beings who had never experienced depression or grief the way humans did. But testing had shown they worked. Not perfectly, but enough. "All ships report ready, Captain," said Park from her navigation station. She had recovered from her ordeal, though she still had nightmares sometimes. They all did. "The fleet is in position." Looked at the boundary line on his display. The edge of darkness, the entrance to the silent expanse. For 400,000 years, no one had entered willingly. Today, 10,000 ships would try. "Open a channel to all vessels," he ordered. The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, Captain." Took a breath. "This is Captain of the human vessel Aurora. In a few minutes, we will cross into the silent expanse. We all know what waits for us there. The Hollow has destroyed civilizations. It has broken minds that were older and wiser than ours. It has waited in the darkness for longer than any of us can imagine." He paused. "But we have something it has never faced before. We have each other. Not just humans, but all of us together. 4,000 species standing side by side. When the darkness comes, we will not face it alone. When the despair tries to drown us, we will pull each other back to the surface." On screens across the fleet, beings of every shape and size listened. Some had 17 eyes. Some had no eyes at all. Some breathed oxygen and some breathed methane. They had nothing in common except this: they had all chosen to be here. They had all chosen to fight. "There are 2,000 humans waiting for us on a dead planet in the heart of that darkness," continued. "They have survived for 30 years through nothing but stubbornness and hope. They sang songs when they wanted to cry. They told jokes when they wanted to scream. They held on to each other when everything tried to tear them apart." He thought of his grandmother, of still somewhere in that darkness, still fighting, of everyone who had sacrificed so that this moment could happen. Today, we tell the Hollow something it has never heard before. We tell it that it is not as strong as it thinks. We tell it that the darkness can be pushed back. We tell it that hope is not just a human weakness. He smiled. "It is a weapon." "All ships," he ordered, "advance into the silent expanse." The fleet crossed the boundary together. The darkness swallowed them instantly. 10,000 ships flying blind, their sensors useless, their crews cut off from the stars they had known all their lives. The Hollow felt them enter its domain, and it was surprised. So many minds, so many flavors of consciousness. It had not tasted such a feast in. It attacked. The wave of despair that hit the fleet was stronger than anything had experienced before. This was not the careful, probing attack that had touched the Steadfast. This was raw power, ancient and terrible, washing over every mind in the fleet like a tsunami of hopelessness. Ships started to drift. Crew members collapsed at their stations. On some vessels, beings who had never felt sadness in their lives suddenly understood what it meant to want to stop existing. But on every ship, humans stood ready. "Deep breaths," Shin shouted into the fleet-wide channel. She was on a medical ship, coordinating the psychological response teams. "Remember your anchors, think of your loved ones, think of why you are here." Across the fleet, beings started singing. Human songs that had been taught to them in the months before. The melodies were strange to most of them. The words were in languages they did not understand. But they sang anyway because the humans had told them it would help. And it did help. Not completely, not for everyone. But the wave of despair began to break against the wall of voices. Now Chief Engineer of the Aurora watched his power readings carefully. "Captain, the Hollow is drawing enormous amounts of energy. It is stronger than our projections. Can we handle it?" "I do not know, but we will find out." The fleet pushed deeper into the darkness. Hours passed. Some ships fell behind, their crews too overwhelmed to continue. Rescue vessels moved to help them, psychologists talking frightened beings back from the edge of despair. But most of the fleet kept going. Humans walking the corridors of alien ships, telling bad jokes, starting sing-alongs, reminding everyone that they were not alone. Alien beings who had never understood why humans laughed at danger, learning that sometimes laughter was the only thing that kept you sane. "Captain," called out, "I am detecting the planet. Daybreak is 30 minutes away." "Are they still there?" "Life signs confirmed. 2,000 humans still alive." Felt tears in his eyes. 30 years. His grandmother had held on for 30 years, waiting for rescue that must have seemed impossible, and here they were. All ships prepare for evacuation operations, medical teams to stand by, transport vessels move to the front of the formation. The Hollow sensed its prey slipping away. It threw everything it had at the fleet: visions of death, whispers of failure, ancient memories of civilizations it had destroyed, showing the fleet that they would join the list of the fallen. But the fleet kept singing, kept laughing, kept moving. On the surface of the gray planet, the people of daybreak watched the sky. For the first time in 30 years, lights appeared in the starless void above them. Ship after ship, descending through the darkness, bringing hope made real. Stood at the edge of the settlement, tears streaming down her face. She was almost 90 years old. She had buried friends. She had watched people lose their minds to despair. She had held on to hope when there was no logical reason to hope. And now ships were landing. Strangers were running toward them. Beings she had never seen before, species that had been legends when she was young, all of them crying and laughing and reaching out their hands. "Elder," a young voice called out. A human in an assembly uniform ran toward her. "I am Medical Officer, Relief Team. We are here to take you home." Home, whispered. The word felt strange, foreign, wonderful. The evacuation took 11 days. 11 days of constant pressure from the Hollow. 11 days of singing and laughing and holding onto each other. Ships were lost. Minds were broken. But for every person who fell, 10 more stepped up to catch them. On the 9th day, a small shuttle was found drifting in the deep darkness. Its pilot was unconscious but alive, her lips still moving in a whisper that might have been a joke. Had survived 19 days alone in the Hollow's domain. When she woke in the medical bay, the first thing she did was ask if they had saved everyone. The second thing she did was tell the doctor a truly terrible pun. "Why did the Hollow go to therapy?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The doctor with kind eyes shook her head. "I do not know." Because it had too many issues to process. The doctor did not understand the joke, but she laughed anyway because was laughing, and laughter seemed important. On the 11th day, the last transport ship lifted off from daybreak. 2,000 survivors watched through the windows as the gray planet fell away below them. Some cried, some cheered, most did both. Sat beside her grandson on the bridge of the Aurora. She was too tired to stand, but she refused to miss this. "Ready to go home, grandmother?" asked. She took his hand. Her grip was weak but sure. "I have been ready for 30 years." The fleet turned toward the boundary. Behind them, the Hollow raged and screamed and threw every weapon in its ancient arsenal, but it could not stop them. For the first time in 400,000 years, prey had come into its domain and left again. Not just survived, but escaped. Not just one ship, but thousands. The fleet crossed the boundary into starlight. Ambassador Tella stood beside as the stars appeared on the viewing screen. Beautiful, ordinary stars. The old woman gasped softly, like she was seeing them for the first time. "Your species has been part of our assembly for 60 years, Tella said. "We thought you were children, fragile, temporary." Smiled and now I understand why humans tell jokes at funerals. He paused, all 17 eyes fixed on the stars. "You do not defeat despair by being stronger than it. You defeat it by refusing to let it matter." Behind them, somewhere in the fleet, survivors began to sing. It was an old Earth song, one about never giving up. They sang it badly, off-key, too loud. It was the most beautiful sound in the galaxy. Back in the silent expanse, the Hollow floated alone in its domain. For 400,000 years, it had been the master of this place, the destroyer of civilizations, the eater of hope. Now, for the first time, it felt something it did not understand. Uncertainty. And perhaps in some ancient corner of its consciousness, something else. Fear. Because if these strange, stubborn, impossible beings could escape, could survive, could laugh in the face of oblivion itself, then perhaps the Hollow was not as powerful as it had always believed. Perhaps the darkness was not forever. Perhaps hope was more than just a weakness to be exploited. Perhaps, after 400,000 years, the silent expanse would not stay silent much longer. But that is a story for another time.